having no cold hands. It's a warm heart.
You are listening to the #Lita podcast, hosted by author, speaker, and coach Jeff Connor. He invites you each week as he has conversations to discover how others are using love to change the world. Listen in and find what inspires love within you so you can go out and share it with the world. Remember, love is the answer.
I have a dream today.
Hello and welcome to the #Lita podcast. My name is Jeff Connor and I'm just super excited to be with you today. As many of you may know, I took a week off last week and we actually talk about that a little bit with my guest and how I was able to do that and what it meant taking a vacation. Some of you guys may experience those feelings too as you get ready to go on vacation, but we'll dive into that in just a minute. First, this is the 20th episode of the #Lita podcast. I can't believe it. Number 20, guest 20, and I couldn't ask for a better guest and a better show, better topic to talk about than happiness, and that's what we're going to do today. I'm really excited to introduce this week's guest, Nancy O'Brien, who is the co-founder of Experience Happiness. And like I said, she's on the 20th episode of the #Lita podcast. So I brought Nancy on to talk about her work in creating what she calls the happiness practice. Nancy co-created the happiness practice with her business partner, Linda, as a way to help people locate and cultivate their serenity and excitement regardless of outside circumstances. This is really exciting work and can literally change the world. The happiness program is a program that measurably improves your happiness and at the same time decreases your level of burnout. I don't know about you, but I can really get behind that idea. Nancy and I have a great conversation talking about her work and how it is helping people all over the world. You won't want to miss her story of an inmate at the Stillwater Prison who, after taking the happiness practice, was able to report back to Nancy and say that he is authentically happy for the first time in his life. And he's in prison for a life sentence. That's huge. And that's just proof, I think, that happiness is something that we can cultivate, that we can find and we can develop and make a habit in our lives, regardless of whatever our circumstances in. And as Nancy's going to tell you over and over again, the ability to do that and that happiness, it's already inside of you. So don't miss this episode. Stay tuned through the whole thing. It's a little bit longer, but well worth the time you're going to spend. And it could definitely change your life for the better. So enjoy. Nancy, welcome to the #Lita podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff, for having me here today.
I am thrilled. I've been very excited about having this conversation with you for several weeks since we first met. I don't know. It's probably been about a month, maybe even a little longer than that.
Thanks to the fabulous Jeff Hudson we met.
Yes, and listeners may recognize that name as one of the past guests that I've had. I think episode 18 was when Jeff came on and talked about what he's doing with his podcast and how he's been working and has overcome his gambling addiction, and that was a lot of fun. And yeah, he connected us, and it's been awesome. We've been finding ways to collaborate, and I love that. And specifically, we're collaborating and over what you're doing in the world, which is through your company Experience Happiness and the happiness practice. And that's kind of where I'd like to just start off. I always ask the $1 million question, Nancy, what's love got to do with it?
Everything. Everyone's on their own journey and everyone kind of has their own kind of moment of awakening kind of to love. And, mine really occurred probably about 15 years ago when I realized that I really wasn't loving myself. I was doing a really fine job of loving others and tending to and caring for others, but I was doing a lousy job loving myself and tending to and caring for myself. And what I know now that I didn't know then was you really don't have anything to give if you haven't been loving and taking care of yourself well.
I say that all the time, that you can't give what you don't have. And if you don't have that love of self that drives you and compels you to take care of yourself and find your own happiness, how can you ever really support another human being in a truly loving way?
Mhm. Yeah, totally.
So so go into, so I guess, how what would be the best way to introduce the work that you and your business partner, and I think Linda is her name.
Yeah, Linda Segue.
Okay. And you and Linda have co-founded and are partners in the company Experience Happiness. Where do we start? Do you want to talk about that specifically, or do you want to talk about what led you guys to starting the company? Where do you think would be the most impactful place to start?
I think I'll start with the latter, Jeff, is kind of how we found ourselves here, co-owning a company called Experience Happiness. We didn't set out to do that. Um, we were friends, actually. We were working at competing consulting organizations, and we were both vying for a project at Best Buy. And the gentleman who was kind of managing that project and making the decision on what firm to hire met Linda and met with me, and he refused to meet with either one of us again about the project until we met each other. He said, I don't know what it is about you two, but you guys are supposed to know each other and you're going to do something fabulous together. Well, I don't know about you, Jeff, but it's not often that a client says that to you, during the sales process, if you will. But Lynn and I were very successful human doings. So it took us about 3 months to finally, meet for lunch. And what was so nice about that lunch meeting is we instantly kind of saw each other and got each other. It's like, you too? Oh my goodness. It's just kind of that, oh my God, finally somebody who understands me. And then for the next few years, we were just, cultivating our friendship. We were also trying to find ways to work together, because it's like, oh my gosh, what I do complements what you do, and what you do complements what I do. And together we could create so much more value for our clients and have a lot more fun. So we did a couple projects together, which was awesome. And so we really got to know each other's, I'll say, capabilities and work style. And to this day, we'll also say we're either together a complete human being, or we're 10, because we're opposites in all the right ways. And we know when something needs to happen, we know who should be the one kind of doing it, because it's in their wheelhouse. So anyway, that was kind of the beginning of a lifelong, friendship. And we had lunch one day. And of course, I was hurrying in with my cell phone in my ear, and knowing that, we only had really an hour to spend together before we all hurried off to the next thing. But at that lunch, when we sat down, she asked me, she said, I just really need to know, how are you doing? And that led us into a very open and vulnerable conversation, where we both realized we were suffering from suicidal ideation. Like, we were doing everything we were supposed to do, Jeff, to have a happy life. I mean, everything I was raised and taught to do, I was doing.
What and I want to interrupt here and just ask you, what were some of those things that you were raised and taught to do that were designed and you were taught were going to make you, I don't know if you were taught they were going to make you happy. And that's, I think, a real distinction is, what's the difference between, and we'll probably get into this, the difference between success and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Are,
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, I'm 61, And, I was, one of the first females hired Omaha, Nebraska branch that wasn't a secretary. I went to college, I got a business degree, and really just a few years prior to that, if you were a female going to college, you kind of had two choices, nursing or teaching. And then, then accounting kind of became popular for women and things like that. So what was interesting is the things that I was taught, like from my mother and my father and the church system and the school system, to have a happy life, like have a family, work hard, go on vacations, have a nice house, keep everything clean all the time. And, and don't share don't burden your problems, with anybody else, type of thing. Those rules kind of weren't applying to me as I was like, trying to figure out how to go to a golf outing with all men and not be the one driving the beer cart and wearing short shorts. Like, we didn't have, some of the protocols, that are in place now. And the Gallup Wellbeing Index score probably came out, I don't know, 10 years ago. But when Lynn and I sat down for lunch, it wasn't out at the time. But if it would have been, we would have scored A+. We had purpose-driven careers. I mean, I was flying all over the world doing customer and experience design consulting. I was volunteer at my kids' school for a decade. We had the two homes, the cars, the boats, the wonderful vacations. I had a huge supportive family and friend system. I was healthy to the point that, on my annual exams, the doctor's like, I don't want to see you for 3 years because you're healthy and you're clogging the system. This is for people who aren't healthy, not healthy people. And so, I think that the biggest belief, what Lynn and I realized, it was our belief system that was really creating our suffering, because I somehow over, the first 4 decades of my life, I implanted and fertilized and watered and put sun on these beliefs, like if I don't do everything perfect, I'm a bad person.
That's got to be tough.
If I ask for help, I'm weak. If I'm needy in any way, that's not good. I should only be giving, not receiving. If I don't do it, it won't be done right. So, I mean, what Lynn and I know now that we didn't know then is we were suffering from all the 16 signs and symptoms of burnout. And at the time, nobody was talking about burnout. They were talking about stress. And, we've gone to all the stress management classes, and there's good stress. There's that good stress, kind of excited. There's an event coming up. Let's get everything together, Then there's the bad stress. It's like, oh my God, this really doesn't end. Like, it's just every day is kind of Groundhog Day. But burnout is like, I can't function. I don't know who I am. I'm barely hanging on. And that's when we realize that, when somebody asks you how you're doing and they say fine, like fine is not an emotion. Fine is not a feeling. Fine is either, I'm doing fine and I'm really rocking it today. But how we would answer fine is just barely hanging on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I hope this doesn't come across that I'm a victim or blaming anything. It was just like I didn't have the tools to cultivate self-love and self-worth. I wasn't raised with that.
Yeah, and I think very few of us, I wonder if even today, the youth of today are raised with that. I'm hoping and I'm hopeful, and frankly, that's a big, huge reason why I started this podcast is exactly what you're talking about is people who seemingly like you and Linda had seemingly probably perfect lives from the outside. You like you said, you had checked all the boxes of a very successful life, and yet none of that was providing you with the happiness you needed, and you were actually at the point of suicidal ideation. How serious was that suicidal ideation for
Oh,
you
I knew how to do
specifically?
it. I had a plan, and
You
so did she.
did. Oh my gosh. When I what this last year, we lost our son, and I went into some therapy myself to help me kind of process, but I also wanted to learn from the therapist how I would be able to best support my wife. And we got into a lot because my wife was just talking constantly about how she wanted to join our son. She
Mm.
wanted to end it, and she talked a lot, and that's fairly normal. It's still alarming to hear that, and I would talk to my therapist about it, and she told me that ask, first say that must be very hard. I'm curious, do you have a plan? And she
Mhm.
said, if there is a plan, that is a very significant ratcheting up of the seriousness. If she actually has a plan and a method for how she would end her life, which it sounds like you did as well, that's pretty serious. That's far along. The boy, for me, like I think about my business, there have been many times when facing the financial crunch of a business that I've thought, well, I got this insurance policy. If I could figure out how to make it look like an accident, I'd be able to at least take care of my parent or my family.
Mm.
But it never moved beyond that to actually planning how I would do it. Um, so there's this kind of spectrum, and I wanted to point that out to any listeners that's significant that you had a plan.
Yes, and I also had wonderful children, and I that always kind of kept me in check.
Yeah.
Not to to put that grief and trauma you know into my children's lives. And I just want to say, Jeff, you know, um, I give you a big hug. What you and your family, have experienced is um, just is really devastating, and the heavy heart, that um, creates, is something I have a lot of compassion for. So I'm sending you a lot of love.
Well, thank you very much. I feel it and I appreciate it and acknowledge it, and it's that love that helps us, and sustains us every day. And I do want to point out, and you and I are going to get to this in a little bit as we talk about the happiness practice, because even with that, I talk all the time about how I have a very deep seated happiness and joy to my life, in spite of that terrible tragedy that we faced. And where this relates really to your work, and I as I explain your work to other people, I always bring up the example of a man that you helped who was in Stillwater Prison. Yeah, and you had mentioned to me that he told you after doing the happiness practice that he was authentically happy for the first time in his life, and he's in prison. And
Mhm.
so at not right now, I don't want to go there, but I just wanted to that's a good, I guess, teaser so pay attention, keep listening, all of you guys out there, because it's going to get better. If it can, we're doing pretty good now, but that that is huge to be able to have a happiness. And you went from, and that's what I want to, I'll let you get back on it, that idea of going from suicidal ideation to kind of where you're at today. You mentioned your beliefs, about you had a blueprint for life, that you basically were saying, if I don't do everything perfectly, I'm no good. If I ask for help, I'm weak. If I'm needy, I'm not good. I should only be giving and never receiving. And all of those beliefs created that kind of blueprint of your life. And then you kind of look at life conditions that don't match up to that blueprint. And that's where I always think unhappiness really starts to build up, is when we have this blueprint of the way life should be, and then we look at the actual conditions of our life and they don't match up to that blueprint, we start feeling some real angst. And that leads to all sorts of problems: depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, drug use, addiction, all of these things. So taking care of it, taking care of ourselves, is probably the greatest gift we can give to the world. And in order to do that, we have to receive, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, and I'm from my current, kind of vantage point of kind of my life experience and the reading that I do and the wonderful people like you that I meet along the way. I mean, we really have to acknowledge that life isn't supposed to be pain free. Like pain is part of life. It's the suffering that we can release ourselves from. We'll often say, with groups that we're equipping the happiness practice with, is like, we're not talking about skipping down the hall and whistling happy. We're talking about the type of happy that says you're okay with you being you, and you can deal with anything life is serving up for you today.
I like that. In fact, you have a specific definition. Experience happiness has a specific definition for happiness.
Yes, because for Lynn and I, that was the first thing we had to do. We had to redefine happiness. We had happiness out there, the kids getting the right grades, winning the next projects, getting the next promotion, whatever it was, right? And so the first bit of work we did, and it took us a minute, is to redefine happiness. And so I'd like to share that with your audience now, which is this: that happiness is our innate ability to locate and cultivate our serenity and our excitement about life, regardless of outside forces. And the word innate is really important because it's already inside of us. We don't have to go searching for happiness. We were each born with it. What we need to do is locate and cultivate it in as many moments of our life experience as we can, regardless of those outside forces. It could be the election, it could be the weather, it could be peer pressure, it could be a death of someone you loved. There's plenty of outside forces. The nice thing about happiness, this serenity and excitement about your life, regardless of outside forces, it's a great indicator of how well you're being you. Because we're all different. We're supposed to be different. I'm not supposed to look and sound and behave like anyone else. I'm supposed to be my unique ingredient and contribute that, to the cosmic soup, if you will. Mm. And we'll often say, it's like, the nice thing about this definition of happiness is you can be utterly happy and perfectly miserable simultaneously. Like,
okay, talk about that.
You can be, when you're innately happy, like, I am good. Like, I'm good. I'm loving myself. I know I'm worthy. I'm good. I'm okay to be here now. And life is throwing me a curveball here. And I've got this. Might not know how it's going to turn out, but I've got this.
How much of that ability, and maybe we'll get into this when you talk a little bit more about the happiness practice, but how much is of that ability, like you said, to be happy and know you've got this? The part I want to kind of key in on for a moment is when you said, I may not know what happens. I think
Yeah. No
for
outcome.
me in my life, I would imagine, when you look at some of the statements that you made, especially the one about I don't do everything perfect, so I'm not good, that is something that is totally outside of our control, right? And we have no real, because in fact it's an impossible standard to be perfect. And I think I know me in my life, I've tried to set things up in a way that gives me the most control. And at some point it just kind of all broke down, and I
Yeah.
realized, I read in a book one time, we think we're in control, but here we are spinning on this huge rock in the middle of nowhere, and we think that we've got some control over anything that happens. And
We
it's
call
an
that being
illusion.
a happiness hostage, Jeff. We there's 5 principles of happiness that make up the happiness practice. And when you learn and practice each of the 5 principles of happiness, you arrive at that serenity and excitement. So the 5 principles of happiness, when you practice them, they bring you to that innate state of serenity and excitement. And principle number 3 is release control to be empowered, because everybody's on their own life path. And there's how many billion of us on the planet right now, and we're all adding our unique ingredients into the soup. So the illusion of control is just that, the illusion of control. And anytime we place our happiness being contingent on anything or anyone outside of us, we become a happiness hostage.
What does that mean, happiness hostage?
If when we well, here's a sentence. Let's see if we'll
Basically, would it be the outside world, things outside of ourself is what's
well, let me
determining
ask
our
this
happiness?
question. I'll ask this question of you and the audience. I'll invite your audience um, uh, listeners to answer this too. It's a 4-word question it's not even a question. It's a statement with a blank at the end. It's a 5-word sentence. So you fill in the blank.
Okay.
I'll be happy when blank.
I'll be happy when blank.
If you can fill in that blank, you're a happiness hostage.
Yeah. That's funny that you said that, because as I'm sitting there thinking myself, how do I fill that in? I'm like, I can't. I don't know. I can't think of anything that I'm waiting for to be happy.
Good. But a lot of times we can fill in that blank.
Oh, there
All
was a time I
when-
did. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, when I get that
So
promotion.
that's just a really good, that's a simple way to check in, with yourself is see if you can fill in that blank, throughout the day, throughout the week. And here's the other interesting thing about control. When we're trying to control the thoughts, the behaviors, of others or the outcomes of situations, how do you feel, Jeff, when you're trying to control, other
Yeah,
people?
angst, I would say, is the best word I can use to describe that. I'm actually probably, when I'm trying to control someone else, I would say I have the most amount of doubt, because I don't I don't know that I can control. I can't. The ability to influence is really tough, and probably the more you grasp at controlling someone, the more that influence starts to slip through your fingers and you lose out on that. So I think, because I recognize that too, if I find myself trying to control someone or something, I feel a great amount of anxiety and stress, because then, and maybe this is a good place to get into a little segue here, if you don't mind, because you mentioned about how that manager at Best Buy, kind of forced you and Linda to come together. Is it Linda or Lynn?
Linda.
Linda, okay. And forced you guys to come together because he saw something there. And I think about how often, in fact, a book you told me about in our very first meeting, Love Money, Money Loves You by Sarah McCrum.
Mm-hmm.
I went out and read it, and it's funny because just before we got on this morning to record this episode, I was reading about how, basically the book is written from the standpoint of money, the energy of money, right?
Yes.
And it was talking about how we kind of that energy out there is constantly trying to put us in the situations and into the presence of the people who can help us, and we oftentimes don't listen to it. And here was a person who actually forced that card on you. You may not, if he would have just recommended it to you, looking back, you can say that's the very thing I needed, was that collaboration with Linda to really move my life and hopefully the lives of other people forward. But had he not forced that, you may have just said, I'll get to it, and then maybe never did, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. So I think that's important. I think, we're supposed to say yes, to life. Um, and, it was funny because as Len and I, cultivated our friendship, we realized that we were like in New York at the same time, staying in the same hotel, and kind of probably missed each other by minutes, in the hotel lobby one day or something. So we had this opportunity. It's like we were kind of destined to meet at some point. There was just enough, things in our lives. Um, uh, yeah, and well, just like, with you and I meeting, it's, somebody that I met through someone else connected me to Jeff. Jeff connected me to you. Now, I'm connecting you to some other people. You're doing the same for us. I mean, I think that's how life works. We need each other, you know? Um, and, if we have a really good internal guidance system, we'll know when to say yes and lean into that. And we'll know when to say no and kind of, walk away. I think we're all doing we're all learning kind of during this really important time of human evolution and transformation to pay attention to our inner guidance system. And that's probably one of the fundamental elements of the happiness practice, is understanding that we each have an internal navigation panel. And we need to pay attention to the data that's coming from that navigation system, which is our emotions. And, with that data combined with the data coming from our intellect, then we can make conscious decisions in our life on a moment to moment basis, that help us cultivate this a happy life that we all deserve. I mean, there's not a human being on the planet that isn't deserving of a happy life. And that's going to show up differently for you, Jeff, than it shows up for me or any of my kids or any of my friends. And then what I get to do is to support and love them on their journey. It's their journey. It is not mine.
Yeah, how often do we rob ourselves of happiness by, especially with our kids, when when they pick a path on their journey that we don't think is appropriate or right for them, or that we think may lead to harm. Um, but how much do we rob ourselves of some happiness uh, in the face of that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've had to have, those conversations with one of my children throughout the years. And I really had to do my own work to realize that it's their own journey. It's not my journey. And I needed to trust it's their own journey and remind them that I'm here for them.
Yeah.
I would, whatever love is always there. And whatever support you need, I will offer it. And I trust you've got this, and there have been kind of some scary moments. And I'm like, this is happening for a reason. Get the lesson. I can't do that work for my child, but I'm like, this is happening for you, not to you. Grab the lesson, learn from it. So having a happiness practice made me a much better parent, because I really feel that I can, of course, continue to love them unconditionally, but support them on their unique life journey.
Yeah, not having to feel that, like, it kind of goes back to that idea of control, right? We as parents, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I know on my own journey, that's been one of my areas in life that I needed to improve upon, and that is letting go of the need to control the path and the lives of my own children, even when I'm seeing them, and that's the other thing. I mean, just because something ended in a train wreck for me doesn't mean it's going to end in a train wreck for them. And so recognizing that my path, just because they may be walking on the same stepping stone at the moment, doesn't mean their journey is going to be the same as mine, worse or better. It's just it'll be different, most likely.
Well, and the thing is, when you look back, Jeff, would you do you really would you really take away any of your quote unquote mistakes?
That's a great question, Nancy. I think about that a lot, and I've really come to this conclusion that there are no mistakes. That, just like what you said a moment ago, and I won't probably say it exactly the way you did, but it had something to do with, the things that you're up against, the things that you're struggling with, or that are problems, kind of, that's where your opportunity is. And that's telling you, it's kind of telling you, I think, where you have some opportunities to grow and develop. And every single decision that we make, in my opinion, ends up, leading us to something better down the road. It may take years to get there, but as I look back at the trajectory of my own life, I see that everything that I did that I called a mistake has got me to this point right now. And man, I'd never want to not be where I'm at right now.
Yeah, we need you know the we need the learnings, and maybe sometime in our evolution of a species we can learn from other people's mistake, but so far we only learn from our own mistake.
Well, yes and no on that. I would say yes. Or yes, there are certain things that, we observe in other people and think we know better and do anyways. And then some of the ones, I just think about, you know, the first person who ever ate that poisonous berry because it looked delicious growing on the tree or the bush, and ended up, dying. Eventually we've learned to stop eating those berries, and
Yeah.
has been handed down through evolution. I think
Takes-
for some reason, the mind, like, we've figured out for our bodies that if we want to strengthen our bodies, we need to work it out. We need to make it uncomfortable and create a discomfort in our body, uh, and a stress and a pressure on it in order to gain strength. And we've learned that throughout human history and evolution. And I think we're just starting to see that the very same concept needs to be, and it is, whether we want it to or not, or recognize it or not, it is being applied to our minds. And the more vigorously we work out our minds, the more we challenge and dive into things that take us outside of our comfort zone, where we don't have control, where we don't understand, and we don't have a guaranteed outcome. The more that we start stretching, the more times that we hit the brick wall and keep trying, and then finally break through, that teaches us how to persevere. And I think I talk about that quite often, just the importance of the struggle, and that's, I think, what you're talking about is the struggle is what gives us the strength. The struggle of lifting 10 more pounds today than I did yesterday gives us more strength.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say is that's how we create resilience. We become resilient by overcoming. Um, uh, I'm trying to take the lesson currently from light. Light never struggles to shine. I think we can release some struggle. I think we're at the point in our evolution that we can release some of the struggle. But you bring up really good point, Jeff, about we do all sorts of exercises to improve our physical health. And we do all sorts of exercises to, maybe improve our spiritual health. Some people, pray and do things like that. But what the happiness practice really is a regime for mental health. And every 2 years, the World Happiness Report is produced by the United Nations, and the 2013 report was really transformative work. The co-authors of that report looked at 1,500 happiness and subjective well-being research studies that were done around the globe, and they came to this conclusion, which was, oh my gosh, we've had it backwards. We used to think we needed to be healthy, meaning physically healthy, in order to be happy. And what they realized in looking at all these research reports is, oh my gosh, when we're happy, authentically happy, not only are we healthier because we have less inflammation in our system, which is the root of most chronic disease states. And we live longer because we have less stress on our system, but we also make more money. People would rather work with happy people than unhappy people. We behave better. We treat ourselves better with more kindness and respect, and we naturally then behave better with others. And so, there's now I was on my walk the other morning, and I live in St. Louis Park, near Wolf Park, and there's a Melrose Clinic is there, and there's these signs in the yard now that say 1 out of 6 youth have a mental illness. And then the next sign, like 15 paces later, says, and the mental health solution is still under construction. And when you look at the rate of suicide now, every 14 seconds, somebody between the ages of 16 and 34 take their own lives. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know about you, but in school, I was taught to train my intellect, but I was not trained to create mental health. I went to gym class, right? And I just don't like to sweat. So that was never a fun hour for me. And I just think, I'm grateful that there's awareness around mental health and mental illness and things like that. And when our education system is geared to getting everybody to graduate and, kind of conditioned to this idea, if, to have a happy, successful life, you need to go to college. When the reality is for all the graduates every year that graduate from high school, there's only like slots for 20% of them. They're like, it's a flawed system, and then you just think about, how much angst, young children have if they don't fit that mold. And because we're not teaching them, it's okay to be who you are, but just be the best version of yourself in as many moments as you can. And yes, learn to do, reading, math, and arithmetic, but also learn how to cultivate happiness. Because you know what? we need the people who love taking care of other people. We need the people who teach yoga classes. We need the plumbers. We need the construction workers. I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, we need everybody, not just the people who went to college. And yeah.
Yeah, you
I-
shouldn't have to be miserable because your calling. I think where things get convoluted a little bit, in our lives, and because of that lack of education and awareness about the importance of our mental health, we become. I heard one time, and I don't remember where, but basically that one of the greatest tragedies is to get really good at something you don't like. And then when I look at my own life and my own career, there have been so many instances where I was really great at doing something I didn't like. And the only reason was because I was chasing dollars. I followed the money. So it got me to do things that didn't feed my soul. And I think what you're seeing, and probably that World Happiness Report will show as well, is that there isn't a real big correlation. I think they say the $75,000 is kind of that breaking point of where happiness, after $75,000 of income, your happiness doesn't rise anymore. Have you heard of that statistic?
yes, but I will just add a comment to this. I think it would be fabulous if everybody in the world was able to do, I'll say, the work that generates income for their families that brought that they were happy to do, that they enjoyed doing. What we'll invite people to do is to bring your happiness even to those tasks and those activities that you can't stand to do.
Yes.
Because when, again, we're being a happiness hostage. I'll be happy when I can just sit on the beach and paint. Well, what I've learned to do is, or my family knows this, I will do anything as long as I have gloves. Like, yes, as long as I have gloves on, I will do the world's dirtiest job. And I will bring my happy. And what I've learned, over the last 15 years is, and I will bring my happiness to that. Because me not bringing my authentic self and my happiness to as many moments in my life experience as I can, no matter what I'm doing, only robs me of a happy life.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really good point, that because that is the first step. I'm not advocating someone who's in a job that they're miserable at today go out and try to find another job to replace it. I think I would say just what you said: learn to be happy there, and as you learn to be happy there, if that's not your calling, I think what happens is that as your happiness increases, those things start to align up that
Mhm.
will let you do what your true calling is. You'll start to discover it. You'll be open to that positive energy that's created, I think, by joy and happiness opens us up to creativity. When we're living in this world of fear and anxiety and misery, suffering in our minds, we get really closed off, and our ability to create, um, I would say, goes down pretty dramatically. And then we just kind of get stuck in that cycle. And you're right. Then people will say, well, I'll be happy when, and they're looking for that job to give them happiness. And I think that is a critical point, that if you can't be happy washing dishes, you're really not going to be happy doing anything else, because
Well,
it's not the dishes that are
yeah, or you
making
look
you
at,
unhappy.
yeah, or I look at those things as like, what a great opportunity for me to practice my happiness when I'm actually engaged in something that isn't one of, my favorite things to engage in. Um, and life is always happening for us, not to us. And I was just sharing with, I had a great conversation with my children and some of his friends the other evening. I'm like, I've been doing a lot of traveling by car during this time, because my pandemic solution is I spend, 10 days with my son in Detroit. I come back in quarantine, and then I go visit my son and her daughter, her husband and the baby, in Rochester. Then I come back in quarantine and I do it all over again. So I'm very safe through all this. But when I'm stopping for gas, there's a reason that I'm stopping for gas at that BP station, or that, Quick Trip. And I realize that I will never have this moment again. So when I go in, to go to the restroom and buy my little, refreshments, I make sure to say hello to the attendant. Because really, of all the joints in the world, of all the gas stations in the world, I'm in this one in this moment. And I remember reading years ago that story about, and I do believe it was a true story, of somebody was thinking about killing themselves and some stranger just gave them a smile. And it changed their mind. And I just thought, that's when I practice it's easy for me to be happy when I'm, with the people I love. We're enjoying each other, we're supporting each other, we're laughing, or when I'm doing, work, that I really love. That's easy. My invitation is bring your happiness to the uneasy stuff and create that ripple effect in the world.
I love that. One of my early guests, Jamie, came on. She was a suicide survivor, and now she helps people on Twitter spread kind of positivity and help people through maybe some suicidal ideations or just with their mental health. But she was telling me, I think on that podcast, that a man was about to die by suicide. He was about to take his life, sitting at his kitchen table, and his dog walked up and put his chin on the man's leg and wanted to be petted. And that simple act of just that dog showing a little bit of love in that moment got him to reconsider. So I believe that for sure. All right. So, and I'm not sure, we're coming up, I think, close to an hour. Are you doing okay for time?
I'm good, Jeff.
Okay.
Lead the way.
So I want to go back because I want to get into the happiness practice. I think we've kind of established, what has led you into this work. You yourself, as well as your partner, Linda, were having burnout and suicidal ideations, even though from all appearances, life looked really great for you guys. But internally, in your own minds, it wasn't. And none of those trappings of success were giving you the happiness that you probably were craving at the time. So that's kind of the premise of what got you guys together, starting experiencing happiness and developing the happiness practice. So I want to try to dive in our remaining time a little bit to what is the happiness practice. And maybe before that, you mentioned there were 5 principles of happiness, and we talked about number 3, release control, to be empowered. Can you tell us the other 4, 1, 2, 4, and 5?
I'll be happy to. So, when Linda and I kind of redefined happiness for ourselves, our next step was to figure out how to cultivate that state of serenity and excitement, no matter what was going on. And so that was kind of our next journey that developed into what we now call the 5 principles of happiness. And I'm going to introduce you to them now in the order of which they're learned in practice. And for adults, each of these principles is learned in practice for 30 days, because that's the time it takes our neuropathology to create new neural pathways. For children, they get this in about 12 weeks. They've got less unlearning to do. And the happiness practice isn't another thing to do. It really cultivates a way of being no matter what you're doing the stuff you enjoy doing the stuff you don't enjoy doing. And you don't need to join a gym, and have a membership. You don't even need a new, set of, gym shorts or yoga wear. You can literally practice this while you're driving, while you're washing the dishes, while you're talking to your children, while you're doing work. And for each of the 5 principles, we give you 3 steps to practice 3 times a day. And because that's how you create these new neural pathways. So I'm also going to just add, we're the only well-being and performance solution that has a measurement system called return on happiness, that we measure not participation, we measure impact and outcomes at the individual and the organizational level. So people can actually assess their levels and symptoms of burnout going down, and their levels and symptoms of happiness going up, and the impact of that on personal performance and organizational performance, whether that be engagement, revenue, operating expense, turnover, things like that. So, and I'll invite you all too, if you go to our website, experiencehappiness.biz, B-I-Z, you can take the free 100% confidential burnout and happiness assessment now, and check your own levels of happiness and burnout. So with that, let me introduce you to the 5 principles of happiness. Principle number 1, be conscious. Pay attention to what you're doing and how you're feeling simultaneously. We're turning on that navigation panel. That's our emotional field. We're all these amazing jet airliners, if you will, and our intellect, if you will, are the jet engines, but we need that navigation panel turned on as well. So when you practice being conscious, you're practicing paying attention to what you're doing, like listening to this podcast, but also how you're feeling. And this is when you learn that no 2 people are ever having the same emotional response to a situation.
That's pretty profound. I mean, I know I don't think about that often when I'm having an emotional, if I'm with other people, I probably just assume that they're having the same kind of impact on themselves as I am.
We're all different. And then you learn, principle number 2 is honor those feelings. So with principle number 2, you learn how to assess how you're feeling, consider what that data is trying to get your attention to, and express what your needs are. And most of the time, the only person that needs to know how you're feeling is you. It's your data. It's your life path.
Yeah.
It's nobody else's.
Can I ask you a question real quick, Nancy, on number 1, and then maybe that'll bleed into number 2. But when I hear be conscious and what you're saying, I just think about my own practice, because I have found my happiness, and I know that it's because of these 5 principles. I just didn't know them. I didn't have your guidance as I found my happiness. And I'm excited to take the happiness practice myself and see how it can work. And we'll talk maybe towards the end about why I'm so into doing that for myself, because of the opportunity I see to get it to so many other people. But be conscious, when I hear that, I kind of think about the amount of time that we spend in our head not paying attention, not conscious of what we're thinking about. And most of the time we're stuck either in a past story and beating ourselves up for something we did, yesterday, week ago, month, years, decades earlier, or we're consumed over worry and fear about a future that hasn't happened yet. Is being conscious a great way? And I think of mindfulness meditation as part of that, as getting us in tune to what's happening right now for us, and recognizing the emotions, and then kind of seeing how it's a lot of times the stories that we're telling ourselves are causing those feelings.
Yeah, so I would say, well, first of all, Jeff, thank you for seeing that you're already practicing the 5 principles of happiness. This practice is already inside every single human being. It's part of our DNA. We've just kind of forgotten. And so when you're going through the happiness practice, it is a practice of remembering. Like we already know we feel better when we're conscious. I mean, have you ever driven from point A to point B and you get to point B and like, I don't even know how I got here.
I use that example all the time about how we're just lost in thought.
Yeah,
And
we're not, we're not here for this moment of our life experience.
yeah.
And you could be thinking all those things, but we want you to also feel what you're feeling. So consciousness is paying attention to what you're doing and how you're feeling. And you might grab some thoughts in there too.
Yep.
Principle number 2, honor those feelings. Again, those feelings are our guidance system. We were all downloaded with the same emotional lexicon. Most of us just play chopsticks on the keyboard of life, though. Mad, sad, happy, glad. And in principle number 2, you expand your emotional lexicon and you start to pay attention, though. You know what? If I really pay attention to how I'm feeling, I'm not so much busy as I am tired. Or maybe I'm actually exhausted, because what I choose to do, if I'm tired, I might take a nap. If I'm exhausted, I might say, I got to step away for a couple of days. And with principle number 2, you learn to make clean, forwarding, kind requests of yourself and others. If you're in the drama, you haven't located your request. And so we all kind of know that complainer in our lives, and like they haven't located their requests. They aren't paying attention to how they feel, because those feelings are just data to help you make a change.
When you say in the drama, are you talking about internally to ourselves and how we are thinking?
Or others.
Is it others, or is it our response, our thoughts about somebody else that's creating that drama? Yeah.
You never know.
So, because I noticed that about myself lately is, and I've talked about it before, I have spent a lot of time in my life ignoring my emotions. I think we've been taught that and educated to do that by well-meaning people, but the big boys don't cry. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Don't be angry. Don't throw a tantrum.
Don't
all
be a
these
baby.
things. Yep. Don't be a baby. So we get it kind of beaten out of us. Beaten isn't the right word, but drummed out of us, to not be emotional. And I spent a good bit of, that's what I love about your practice and then these 5 principles. Like I said, I know that these are all innate to us. We're asleep to them a little bit. And I was able to but it's been a period of probably 7 years of actively seeking and understanding these 5 principles.
Yeah, I mean, there's no coincidence that the greatest need in school right now is for social emotional learning.
Yeah.
Because our society, has, I mean, I remember growing up, I was acting out. I remember kind of having a tantrum about something, and my parents just like, we don't care how you feel. We just want you to be smart. I mean, they literally kind of like got me off at the neck. It's like, so, I'm no different than a lot of, I'll say, males in our society. I was smart, we don't care how you feel type of thing. No wonder I kind of woke up thinking this is not a life worth living. So then principle number 3, we talked about release control to be empowered. This is where we get our power back, because all that energy we spend trying to control and manipulate others, we get back. I mean, we can literally see the lights in people's eyes shine brighter when they're practicing principle number 3. And then principle number 4 is co-create what works now, because everything and everyone is always, always, always changing. So what worked 5 minutes ago, what worked 5 years ago, probably is going to work now or 5 minutes from now or 5 years from now. And, the next wave of this pandemic will be massive innovation. Like, we're going to have the amount of innovation that typically transpires in a decade happen in 24 months. Like, get ready. That means whatever we're doing on October 8th, when we're recording this, is not what we'll be doing on November 8th. So being in the co-creation mode and getting everybody else, whether it's your family system or your work system or whatever communities you're working, or even just yourself. Sometimes what works now is like, well, I was going to go to a walk at 7 a.m, but it's 30 degrees. Now I'll wait till it's 50 degrees and go for my walk. Whatever it is, because a lot of times we're just trying to control ourselves. Like for decades, I really believe that if I wasn't a good mother or wife or homeowner, if the beds weren't made every morning before, everybody left for school or work for the day, and my house wasn't like party ready. Come on, really. I don't make my bed now. Thank you very much. So
can I give you an example that just hit me this morning, or yesterday and this morning, that I've been, I do this podcast and I am absolutely convinced, I've convinced myself that one of the most important things I need to do is be very consistent, release it every Monday, do an email blast on Tuesday, and then do a secondary post, kind of post a little snippet video so people tease them a little bit to try to drive them to. And then on Friday, I do what's called the Take 5 Friday newsletter that I put out. And this week is particularly hectic for me because I'm getting ready to go out of state on a duck hunting trip with my family. And I'm really in angst over getting this newsletter out tomorrow and getting a podcast episode. And I've been super, the story I tell myself is this is all going to fall apart if I don't stick to my schedule.
Oh. So there's a belief sitting there. So let's hang on that. Hang on that. Just hold that.
Got it.
Because principle number 5 is learn life lessons. And in the context of THP, that's about looking at our belief systems, because our beliefs drives our thoughts, feelings, and behavior. And there is, I think, going back to your previous question, which causes our angst and our depression. So let's just dig into this, Jeff.
Yeah, because I was up at 4 o'clock this morning.
So first of all, and I'm going to speak on behalf of all your listeners. Can Jeff take a week off and go duck hunting? Is that okay, everybody? Is that just perfectly fine with you? That Jeff gives himself the well-deserved experience of enjoying the fall weather, duck hunting with his friends and family, and we will be just fine. We will be here for him when he returns. Okay, so that's what your listeners are saying. But Jeff, you've got a belief or two sitting there. So what belief that is playing that is causing you that angst?
I guess it's the belief that if I am not consistent with what I'm doing, then I'm going to lose whatever momentum I've created in building and cultivating an audience for this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in the practice, there's 5 steps to learn a life lesson. So, okay, so what discomfort is that belief causing you?
Oh, insomnia. I was up pretty early this morning with that thought and wondering how am I going to get all of this done. Mm-hmm. Angst, anxiety and stress over, trying to get the audience built up, get this value, what I consider valuable, and I think other people do as well, value of the podcast into as many lives as possible. Mm-hmm. And I guess the belief that if I'm not consistent, then And frankly, part of it is it a slippery slope? If I cut myself some slack this week, does that make it easier to do it next week? And then before you know it, it's kind of like dieting, right? If I eat that bag of chips now, or even recovering alcoholics, and it's funny now that you're saying this and I'm talking out loud, I'm seeing all these thoughts, about and how I've kind of admonished, or talked to folks, if you're a recovering alcoholic and you went, a year sober and you had a relapse one night, how often do our thoughts cause us to just throw in the towel because we think, well, we're a failure? When the reality is we just went 365 days without a drink. We had one night where we had a drink, and tomorrow we don't, it's not even starting over. It's just continuing to not drink until and if it happens again. And I guess that's the same to me. That's a lot of what's going on here is I'm not following my own advice.
Mhm. So now that you've located that belief and you've identified kind of the consequences of that, the how, the discomfort, right, that comes with that belief. I want you to, I know you're at your desk, go write down that belief that if I am not consistent with my podcast kind of schedule and routine, I will let my audience down. That's kind of the belief I heard. Is that close?
Yeah, I will let my audience down and I will lose momentum in building the audience.
So write that down because that's your current belief that's
Okay.
causing you that discomfort that you just identified.
Got it.
Now, I want you to look at that piece of paper and I want you to thank that belief. It served you this long. And now I want you to tear that piece of paper up into like 10 little bits and throw it away and say, I'm done with you. So very important. It's like pulling a weed from your garden.
I'm done with you.
I'm done with you. Now, this is the most important. This is the next step. You need to plant a new belief. So what belief do you want to plant and water and nurture for the next 30 days?
I might need a little help with that one because like how do I form that new belief? Is it that I don't need to be consistent in order to cultivate an audience?
I'm going to say it's something like this. Let me I want this to be your belief, but let me see if I can get you there. Get you a framework for it.
Yep.
Me taking a break to be able to nurture my well-being will not impact the great work I'm doing with this podcast.
Writing it down.
And sit with that. I mean, this is where the first four principles I walk through, you can kind of practice every day, a zillion times a day. This fifth principle, we do invite people like pour yourself a cup of tea, sit with your belief system, for a couple of hours, look at that garden. Because the thing is, and then as you practice this, you will catch your beliefs and actions all day long. Oh, there that belief goes again. And some of our beliefs are serving us, but some aren't. So all destructive beliefs are born from two root beliefs. One, I'm not loved. The other is I'm not worthy. When we operate from the root belief of I'm not loved, we tend to compromise our own well-being in order to seek approval from others. When we're operating from the core belief of I'm not worthy, we tend to put other people down in order for us to temporarily feel good.
And I can see my belief would fall in that category one. I think that I'm not feeling that's still a lingering feeling of not being loved.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what you'll see is, and this is what you'll learn in the practice, Jeff, is, then there's all these kind of sub beliefs that kind of populate from that, and the thing is, none of us are exempt from this. Every human being on the planet is walking around, with one foot in one of these camps or a foot in the other. And we kind of go back and forth through our life. The first 50 years, I was operating from the belief of I'm not loved. Now I'm operating from the core belief of I'm not worthy, and extinguishing all of those kind of sub beliefs, that go around that. And, just back to kind of this, and thank you for being so vulnerable and brave and open to do this on air. But, if there was a child who was tired, right, you would say, honey, it's time for you to take a nap.
Hmm. Yeah.
You wouldn't say, go get 15 things done and then take a nap.
Yeah.
You would say, take the nap now, then you'll be able to, you can, do your homework and your dishes later. But, sometimes when I look at the belief system that, when I'm wandering around my belief system, I think of myself as a child. What would I tell a child that I loved? Would I really want to plant and water and fertilize that particular belief? I don't think so.
Yeah, I love that idea of, especially like when we talk about our self-talk, like if you wouldn't, we tell ourselves things in our mind, or sometimes, so that some of us like to talk out loud. I know I do, but we will say some of the most vicious things that we probably would never even say to our worst enemy out there, but we have no problem telling ourselves that. And so I think that that's good. And another thing that this really brings up to me, and I think it's important, because I talk about this a lot too, is happiness. It's all there, and I hear what you're saying. I'll be curious to hear your reaction to this, because I recognize that all of this is within us, that happiness has always been there. It's just we're not recognizing it. Because of conditioning, education, and life experiences, whatever. And so what I've recognized is that happiness is something that, like this morning when I woke up at 4:00 in the morning and had these thoughts, I didn't just let them consume me. I started doing things and thinking things and taking some action to change those. And frankly, just the conversation that we've had is a part of that too, right? I took another step in bringing it up to you because I saw an opportunity to really help me, obliterate that limiting belief and that idea. But what I really notice is that I told you at the beginning that I'm a very happy guy and a very joyful person. And what I just recognized here is that it's not a static thing, our happiness. And
Yeah.
it's something that has to be cultivated sometimes on a moment by moment basis. And it takes a little bit of effort sometimes
Yes.
to do that. And that's what I think the happiness practice is, a great tool to make that practice easier. What I've done for the last 7 or 8 years, and frankly, I've been on this kind of quest to break it down. And I think I can stop that quest based on our discussions and what we've been talking about with the happiness practice. I think you've done that. What I've been wanting to do is really break it down into simple format, how to be happy and how to practice everyday happiness. So if you wake up every day just expecting to be happy and not having to put any effort into it yourself, I think that's where a lot of us break down. Like I know I used to, why can't it just be easy? Why can't I just enjoy life just by living life? And I think I would always look for that kind of holy grail of happiness. I think many of us are, and it is a practice to be happy. It's a
I mean,
choice on a
Richard,
moment by
Richard,
moment basis.
Richard Branson says, happiness is not a goal, it's a habit. And it's okay to wake up unhappy and just be with yourself and say, wait, something's off. Your happiness is the indicator of how well you're being exactly who you're meant to be at this moment in your life experience. Because you said something earlier, I just want to touch back to, it's like the purpose of life is to be happy. We are multidimensional beings. We don't have just one, like when people find your purpose, it's like, well, is my purpose to be a mother? Is my purpose to be um, a friend? Is my purpose to be a creator? Is my purpose? I mean, like, don't limit me to one purpose, please. I got too much going on. And so when you focus, when you direct your purpose to being happy and bringing your happiness to the multiple dimensions of who you are, now we got something.
Yeah, I think that is,
We got to shift from being human doings to human beings.
yeah.
We've got to, and the longest journey each of us will take is going to be the 17 inches from our head to our heart. And that's what the happiness practice allows us to do. It equips us to take the journey, the 17 inches from our head to our heart, and transition from human doings to human beings. And the practice is a practice of self-love and self-worth. And from that point, we are the change we want to see in the world.
I love it. I love it. And that has been a very recurring theme on many of my podcasts, is just that importance of self-love. So I like that we're really hitting it home. I think, for any listener out there, this is the place to start, is on your own happiness, filling your own bucket up, because when your bucket's overflowing with love, you've just got an unlimited supply to give to other people. But if you have none in there, if your bucket's empty, you've got nothing to give. You can't give what you don't have. So it's so important. Nancy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time that you've come on. You've helped me tremendously in this little less than an hour and a half. And just as we're wrapping up our time today, I want to ask you a final question, which is pretty simple, but is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have, or anything that you would like me and the listeners to know that we didn't talk about yet in our conversation?
The only thing I would add is it's really just to emphasize your happiness is the gift that you give yourself and the world. Treat it as such. Nurture it, polish it, cultivate it, and know that that is the most important gift that you can give yourself and others, is your authentic happiness.
I love it. That is beautiful. And I did want to, because I mentioned it at the beginning, so I got one more thing, if you got just another minute. Can you tell the story of that man in prison that we talked about just a little while ago?
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So it's really quite a fun story. So if you and I would have met a dozen years ago, my life would have read like a Netflix series, 3 Men, a Ghost, and a Puppy. I was transitioning out of a 23-year marriage, living in a town home. My oldest child was off at college. My younger child had just started their freshman year. And right on cue, about 6 weeks into the freshman year, his anxiety and depression bloomed. So he stayed at school a little bit longer and then, moved in with me. And my older brother was homeless and unemployed for the 5th time in his life. So he moved in with me. So that was 2 men. And then I noticed that one of my son's friends was spending a lot of nights on our couch in the family room. So one morning when I was, saying goodbye as I was leaving for work, I just asked this young man, and I didn't even know his name. I only knew him by his rap handle. I said, do you have a place you call home? And he's like, I've been trying to keep that on a download, ma'am. And I said, well, you're happy to live here for a year. You don't have to worry about paying rent. You don't have to worry about where your next meal is. But if you live here, I want you to do your work, meaning the happiness practice. And that all of us, because now there's going to be 3 men and me in the living together, and we're going to operate as a group. This isn't 4 people living independently. We're going to love and support each other and kind of do the practice. It was really interesting because then we brought in the puppy, because my son's like, if I'm going to live here, I finally want to have a dog. So we get the puppy. All good. So I've got 3 men and the puppy. And I had a work assignment. I needed to be like in Germany for like 3 weeks or whatever. So I left for Germany and I came back and the dog was howling. The young men were like, oh, thank God you're back. I'm like, what? He goes, we have a ghost. I'm like, how can this be? It's like a 2-year-old building, so it's not the home. Well, I do happen to know a ghostbuster or two. So I called my friend who's a ghostbuster and she told me what to do. So I do that. And we kind of figure out that this property that we were living in was on used to be native land. Anyway, so we did all that. So then what was so interesting is, my son's friend, he starts the practice and he's like, oh my gosh, I wasn't raised with any of this. This is unbelievable. This is life transforming. So, and you could just see this young man just transition, just right in front of my eyes. Well, skip forward a decade later, last year, I was in the process of moving, so I invited him over. I'm like, clearly you want some of my things. He said, I do, especially your purple dishes. So good. Out go the dishes and a few flat screen monitors and good. But he says, before he leaves, he said, I just want you to know that without you taking me in and without the happiness practice, I'd either be dead or in prison. And he said, and I'd like you to introduce you to my brother who is in prison. So quickly I got introduced to his older brother who's in prison. And the first thing his older brother said to me was, thank you for saving my brother's life. And what I didn't know is that these 2 brothers have been talking for the last decade about the happiness practice. And then we were able to I was able to find a way. It wasn't easy necessarily to get this gentleman into the happiness practice. So I coached him through the happiness practice on our 15-minute, collect calls from, the correctional facility. And he's about halfway in the practice and he would say, I don't know, but something is changing. And I could tell like he's about to feel authentic happiness for the first time in his life. And sure enough, about a week later, he called and he said, are you sitting down? He goes, I'm authentically happy for the first time in my life. And I still am in prison with a life sentence.
Wow. That's such a powerful story and just testimonial to what you're doing and the opportunities for lives to be changed. You have a goal by 2025 to
1 billion people equipped on the planet with the happiness practice.
1 billion. And that's only 12.5% of us on the planet.
And that's all we need for the tipping point.
Wow.
And the thing is, this practice is inside of each and every, which is why, it's already inside of us. And anyone can learn to share the practice with others, which is why I'm so excited, Jeff, about working with you and bringing the happiness practice into communities where there's healing needed and there's suffering, because anyone can experience these shifts, and anyone can help others do the same. The reason we call the people at Experience Happiness who are certified to share the practice with others, we actually use the word Sherpa for them. They're called THP Sherpas, because we try never to preach the practice. We try not even to teach the practice. We try to share the practice by demonstrating we're in practice too. Everyone's climbing this mountain. Everyone's going through their own life journey. We're all in this together. And the 5 principles of happiness will always bring you back home. They're your center place of your well-being.
Yeah, I love it. I can't say enough how impressed I am with the work you guys have done, what you're bringing out. I can't wait to become a bigger part of it through the Waylon James Foundation. As you and I have discussed, that's my kind of dream and vision, is to have this Waylon James Foundation, because Waylon was struggling with being happy, and that's our mission, is to help people thrive, and happy people thrive, unhappy people don't. And so if we can help, and fund and get this into places like, the Stepping Stone Emergency Housing, the homeless shelter that I work at, and other homeless shelters around the country, around the world, if sober houses, rehabilitation clinics, you name it, there's so many places where this is needed, workplaces. And I'm so happy you and I are collaborating and come alongside one another to do what we can do to just push this out. Let's get to that billion people. Let's hit that tipping point and see how the world changes all over, just by cultivating some happiness out there.
I can't be more honored and privileged, Jeff, to be on this journey with you. So thank you for creating this platform for me to share, what we're doing at Experience Happiness. And Jeff, there's a lot of great stuff I'm looking forward to collaborating with you on. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you for coming.
Hunting. Take a week off. You're well deserved.
Yep, I'm gonna. You've convinced me, or I've convinced myself. I'm not sure which way that works, but I've developed a new belief.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nancy. This has been so much fun and so informational, transformative for me, for sure. And I hope those out there listening, I'll make sure to include links to Experience Happiness in the show notes, so people can get a hold of you, so they can go take that assessment for themselves and measure their own level of happiness today, and see how they can start cultivating that happy life for themselves. So thanks again for just a wonderful hour and a half together.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to the #Lita podcast, hosted by Jeff Connor. We hope you are now inspired to say love is the answer. Now go out and change the world.
Can you tell me you want more for you and me? Give me something to hope for.